All right. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Dad at Arms channel. I am your host, Colt, the Dad at Arms. And with me today, I have a very, very exciting guest. We have Tiffany Smith, Andra herself. Welcome, Tiffany.
Woo! I feel like I just want to say man at arms since you get to be
That's
dad at
right.
arms.
Yeah, we have the Dad at Arms and we have Man at Arms. So
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
a powerhouse episode.
Seriously. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk all things MOTU, all things Andra, all of your awesome action figures behind you.
Thank you.
Collectibles, I love it.
Yeah, that's just one wall. If I could pan my laptop around, like I'm surrounded by all this stuff.
I have a couple Andras, and so I have one in a box that I keep on here, then I have one that's out of the box because you got to take them out of the box.
Well, I had to get two of them so I could display her with both.
Yes.
Both gear sets.
The cloak and the mask are the coolest, man.
Oh, it's so cool. So very cool. And we need a new
I know.
Man at Arms figure.
I know.
Hopefully with that cool mech suit that you built.
Yeah, seriously. I was like, there needs to be a Man at Arms, Andra.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah. So we're here today. We're going to talk about the upcoming one-shot comic from Darkhorse Comics, Andra.
Yeah.
This is set between the events of Revelation and Revolution, correct?
Yep.
Very cool.
That is correct. Uh-huh.
And you are the writer for this comic, which is super cool.
Which still feels surreal when people say that, because I'm like, oh, I did write it. I did. It's crazy.
Yeah. And that's awesome. And this is your first comics writing credit. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I grew up reading comic books, and I joke that like my entree into comics was watching X-Men, because when I was younger, there weren't a ton of characters that looked like me. So my dad was like, why don't you watch X-Men? And I became obsessed with Storm. Mm-hmm. And then he was like, well, if you like the shows, you could read all these comics.
Here's all of this stuff.
Yeah. So that was what really got me into comic books. So I've always been a comic book reader. I remember when I first moved back out to California, when I was looking for where I was going to live, I went to like 4 or 5 different comic shops and was like, which one do I like the best? This is the one I want to live close to. And I actually, yeah, I needed the right local shop. And there was one shop I really loved going to. I used to go to Secret Headquarters a lot. And they had, when I first moved here, they had these awesome like comic book, they were like wooden custom made comic book shelves. And they got like a whole new set. And I remember being like, can I please buy some of those? So I have 2 from their shop that I have a lot of my comic books up in.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And and I saw your you posted the other day on social media about how now you get the creator discount for when you go into comic stuff, which is so cool.
I was like, I love going to get my comic books. While I was there, I was like, oh, I was kind of starting to ask, like, knowing a bunch of comic book writers, which I'm very lucky that I do have some friends that are writers, and they were like, so where are you going to go do signings? So I was at a shop and I was like, hey, so like, do you guys do signings? How do I kind of set that up? And they're like, oh, wait, are you a writer? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, then you get the creator discount. And then he asked what comic it was. And I was like, Andra. And he was like, oh my God, that's so exciting. I was not wearing my Master of the Universe jacket that day, but like now I feel like I need to walk in and be like, hey, so I'm a comic book writer now.
Yeah, you walk in with the swag on and be like, yeah, this is me.
Yeah. But it was, it's every step of the process of this has been so surreal, just because like I grew up reading comic books. I grew up watching Masters of the Universe. And so now to get to go into a comic shop and be a comic book writer for a character that I've gotten to voice and kind of be along for, I would say like 90% of the journey. There's 10% that we got from the comics and stuff, but the rest of it has been from the show, and then getting to write in her voice, which now I think has really become like, I feel very, very much like her voice is my voice in a lot of ways, just because of the fact that like, I remember when we started recording, and when you do voiceover, sometimes you'll submit a voice and then you get in the booth and then they kind of ask you, to do some different stuff or like change it up or do kind of whatever they want you to do with the voice. And for mine, it was very much like, I remember Kevin Smith just being like, she's you, like you are the audience's entree into this world where you're excited about all the stuff that's happening in this world. And so you get to bring everyone in with you. So he was like, it's you, but like amped up. And so it's been super fun to get to take that and have that trust when I started writing the comic, because I was like, okay, I do know her voice. I do know it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, while we're on that note, let's talk a little bit about Andra and her, and her characterization in the cartoon. Obviously, it's based on Andra, who first appeared way back in the 80s in the Star Comics. Yeah, that was a Marvel subsidiary, I believe. And yeah, she was a lieutenant. She was friend of Adam, friend of Tila during those stories. I think she was only in like 3 issues, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was very
brief.
Yeah, it was very brief. And, I think part of what and this is from chatting with the people over at Netflix while they were coming up with the stories and the writers and stuff, where I know they were trying to find a character that, could speak really well to having a relationship with Tila and already kind of know the world. And so I think when they finally landed on Lieutenant Andra, it was like, okay, they went to the academy together. There is this history together. How can we kind of draw from that and then have these friends that have a like shorthand between each other that nobody else would have, or that, it would just easily like drop you into knowing that they have a strong relationship. And that was to get to do that stuff with Sarah Michelle Gellar was crazy and so exciting, because she did Tila on the first season. And then we had Melissa Benoist on the second season, which was awesome as well. But it was so much fun to get to kind of develop that dynamic between the two characters on the show. And I think that like was part of the excitement of writing the comic too, that no spoilers, but like the opening of the comic is basically me just realizing like how fun their friendship could really be. Like the kind of stuff that they would do together. And so it was really exciting to get to write that. It was really important to me to have time with the two of them together in the book too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, we're going to get to see Tila a little bit in this comic without getting too spoilery.
This is what's weird is like, I've been on the other side where I do the interviews. So where it's like, I know certain things. And now on this side, it's like, wait, but I already know everything that's going to happen. And I'm like, what is going to be considered a spoiler? What do I want to hold back? What are we not going to share? What am I going to share? So that's been interesting, just kind of leading up to the release of the book, where it's like, I feel like because I've been a fan for my whole life that it's like I'm just getting to talk to my friends as this process goes on. And so sometimes I have to remind myself that I'm like, as much as I want to just like blurt everything out, I'm like, hold on, Tiffany. Let's baby step it. Let's just give them little teasers here and there, because if I had my way, I would want everyone to know the story right now. But like, also, I can't wait for everyone to have the book in their hands and read it from start to finish and just get to experience it, because I'm super proud of it.
Very cool. And speaking to your personal fandom, that's one thing that I absolutely adore about the Revelation and Revolution team of creators. You've got people like Ted Biaselli, you've got people like Tim Sheridan, Rob David, all of these people who are massive fans of this brand, and they know it inside and out. And I'm gonna tease you just a little bit, because I know you're a big fan of this brand, and I'm gonna play a little clip from one of your interviews that I just found so charming. So here we go. If you're ready.
I'm ready. Kind of.
He-Man is getting some help from his sister She-Ra in the new series He-Man: The Eternity War. Writer Dan Abnett gives us nostalgia overload with a He-Man She-Ra team-up and the return of Skeletor. So I'm very excited about this comic, as you can see. But what do people need to know going into He-Man: Eternity War? He-Man: The Eternity War comes out later this month. But before we go, would you do the oath with me?
Okay, by the power of Grayskull, I have the power!
I love that so much. My friend Jukka Isakainen, who's a fan from Finland and knows so much about Master of the Universe, he sent that to me, and he's like, because I told him, I was like, I get to interview Tiffany. He's like, okay. He's like, well, here's a clip for you.
That's perfect. I mean, the crazy thing was, I remember like watching that clip makes me laugh, because when I was little, my sister and I would watch the cartoon, and I talked about this, but like we would sit in front of the cartoon, and as the credits or as the like theme songs playing for any animated show, we would be like, I'm her, I'm him. You wouldn't do anything while you're watching the show, but you just like screamed it. And so as you're watching it, you were like, oh, look at that cool thing I'm doing. Look at that cool thing Kira's doing right now. Or keep, and then we'd run around the house in our little like themed underoos and pajamas and stuff and be like, I'm He-Man, She-Ra, Barbie, Princess of Power. Like, all of the names rolled together. So it makes me laugh and just feel so happy on the inside because of the fact that like I feel like my younger version of myself was already ready for all the stuff that was coming for me in the future. I just didn't know. Like there's a class photo of me from elementary school, I think, and it's a regular class photo, but I have a little Mermista action figure in my hand. So my mom, when I booked the voiceover for the animated show, my mom was like, you have manifested this since you were a little girl. This is a photo of you with this action figure. So yeah, that clip, I mean, getting to do all that stuff with DC All Access was amazing. And I think it's been so awesome to get to kind of, like I said, balance both sides of it, where it's like I get to be a fan, but also now I'm on the writing side of things. And I think because I've got to interview such incredibly talented comic book creators, like Tim Sheridan, for instance. Tim was so supportive of me through this whole process. And he would say I could, but I was like, I don't think I would have finished it without him, just because of the fact that I would call him and be like, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. Is this horrible? Like, does this look like a 3-year-old wrote this? Like, because I also am so passionate about the property that I wanted to make sure that I was doing it justice and that, all of the new Andra fans would be excited, but also I wanted to make sure that I did something that was special for all of the MOTU fans that have been around since the very beginning,
Yeah. And one thing that I really, really enjoyed about your character in the first season particularly is when we meet you and Tila are, working together as mercenaries, and Tila is obviously in a pretty dark place. She's found out that she's been lied to. She's lost Adam. And I like that you are there. And the way I read it is that you're there as kind of an anchor of what Tila really is inside, that she's forgotten about herself. You are there, kind of to remind her, no, she's a hero and you need to remember that. And even in the show itself, in some of the episodes, you remind her of that vocally, and be like, regardless, this is what we need to do, even if, and I absolutely love that about your character.
I think that it's something that I try to do with my friends, and my close circle of friends do with me too, where it's like, it's much easier to champion your friends because you see them from the outside. Sometimes when you're at a loss for where you're at, it's harder to see those things in yourself. It's harder to be like, no, I am actually a hero. Yes, I am actually, I've done all these things. And so I think their friendship was so awesome to me because that's what I strive for in my life, is having friends that when I can't see something because I'm so inside of it, that they can just be like, no, look at all these things you've done. And to have that like gleeful excitement about it, because that's the part about Andra that I love so much too, is when it's like, she's getting to see all these people and go into the castles and experience things firsthand that she's only heard about. And even though they're friends, she still gets so excited about it because it's so cool. Like, and that's like, I remember every time I go into, like, I've gotten to, which I'm so lucky to have gotten to do, like a tour of Sideshow, or like when I have gotten to go to the Mattel offices or the DC offices or whatever it is, where it's like, I just get so excited about the books and the collectibles and all of it. And I'm like, I've been around it for a while, but every time I get so excited about it all. And that's what's exciting about being a fan. Like even on my side of things, where I do these interviews and stuff, I get to speak with people who are currently making the thing that I love, you know, that is my absolute favorite thing in the world. And that just, I talk to my wife all the time about it. I'm like, I still can't believe that I get to do this, and I love it. It's fun being a fan. I mean, to me, that's the goal, is that even though I'm sure at times it feels like work because you have to get things done at a certain time, at a certain place and all of those things, it's still getting to have it, a piece of that be something that you just love so much. Like I said, writing the comic book is probably one of the harder things I've done as a creative, just because I'd never written anything on my own. I write poetry and, but I'd never written a novel or a script, and I had one of my friends tell me, well, you chose the hardest medium to start in, because he's like, you're basically writing an entire script and storyboarding it, because you're writing what is inside of each panel and how you want the story to go, and then also having them to communicate it to the artist that you're working with, which I'm so lucky because I have Adriana Melo working on this, who is so incredibly talented. And that's on the interiors of the book. And then we have the variant covers from more incredibly talented artists, which I'm just like, I just pinched myself because, Skylar did that cover, and it's so amazing. Like, just getting to have them kind of see the story I had written and then come back with art is mind blowing, because I think this is something I'm learning too with the process, is every writer works differently with every artist, and you kind of figure out what your process is along the way. And for me, it was really important to me to have an artist that I wanted them to be able to put their own stamp on it as well. So it was like certain things where I'd seen Adriana's work and seen things that she'd done in other books, and I was like, okay, so kind of like what you did here, I love this for this kind of a vibe. So I didn't have to be so specific all the time, because it almost felt like there was a shorthand, because I'd seen her art and she had the story, and it was like, okay, there's just like an easy trust there, which is really exciting.
That's awesome. I think that's so cool. Well, I'm very excited for you. Like this is a neat moment. And when the comic was first announced that you were writing it, like, just made me smile. Like, perfect fit. So
yay.
I'm very excited for you.
It's crazy because I think, looking at the whole journey for me, where, I think any talent creative that comes into LA and wants to act or do anything in this space, like, having an action figure is like the pinnacle. And so just on this journey with this property that I've loved so much as a kid, I'm like, I've gotten to voice a character. I've gotten to really flesh out a character on an animated series that didn't have a ton of story. And then getting to then take that into the comic book, just with a story that I wanted to tell. And it's been absolutely incredible. I mean, there's like no words for it. And now I'm like, the only other thing is I'm like, so when does Andra get to be in live action?
Exactly. And for anyone listening, if it's not you that they cast as live action Andra, then they're making a mistake. It needs to be you.
I would absolutely love to play that role. I mean, it was interesting, because I think sometimes, you'll do a character, and like I said, it's developed before you have any say in it. And some of the character was already obviously fleshed out, but it was interesting getting to do the animation, because Powerhouse, they're so incredibly talented.
Mm-hmm.
We'd do voiceover sessions, and I would come in towards the end, and it was like they'd have animatics of what she was doing as she was saying certain things if they were having me record. And I was like, did you guys just put in like how I stand in the booth, like in the character? And they're like, yeah. So it was really cool, because it was kind of this like symbiotic relationship of like both of us infusing stuff into the character and coming directly from me and stuff. So I hope that connection and the passion that I have for this character comes across for everyone when they're reading the book.
Wonderful. That's so cool. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about you as a fan. We've kind of alluded to it a little bit, and I'm glad you talked about how exciting it is to kind of have this full circle moment where you get to voice a character and have an action figure of the character and write for the character. You mentioned that you grew up watching the cartoon and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
What, as far as like the media that we have for Masters of the Universe, from the Filmation cartoon to the 2003 Mike Young production series, New Adventures, everything, what would you say is your favorite version?
I mean, it's got to be, it has to be, well, okay, no, this is hard because it's two, because it has, I mean, it's where it started for me, which was the original animated show, where
mm-hmm.
I once I booked Revelation, I bought all the DVDs and rewatched them all again. And just getting to sit there and like, some of my favorite stuff is the moments, like the lessons from Orko at the end, where I'm just like, it's just like, as you're watching it, it immediately just brings back this childhood feeling that it's like ingrained in you and you don't know it's there until you're rewatching it again. So I would have to say it's a tie between that one and then actually getting to be a part of it, because I am so proud of the show that we made. I think that it's so beautifully done, and I think that all of the writers were so passionate about the property too. Like you mentioned, Teddy Biaselli, who a lot of times you have an executive somewhere and it's like they might enjoy it, but like Teddy's when Teddy does interviews, his background looks like yours does. Like he has an entire room and he'll like pose them, and it's like he has such a passion for it. And so the thing that was so great was, every single person working on that project all felt that way, which is why I think it came across for me as strongly and well as it did, because I knew I could trust whatever they were doing with the characters, even if sometimes there were some cliffhangers that people were like, "Oh no!"
Right.
Like, trust us, just trust us. It will come back around. You're gonna be happy. So I think it would be a tie between those two for me.
Good answer. I think, and honestly, I think that's what my answer would be too, because I grew up with the Filmation cartoon, and it just has such a special place in my heart, and then going into Revelation and Revolution, I finally got to see these characters move forward along their paths and their storylines that were set up in that old cartoon.
Yeah.
And that was just something that was so satisfying to me. When we were backstage, I was talking about how my wife and we got married about 19 years ago almost, this summer. And when we got married, I convinced her to let me put my vintage He-Man and my vintage Tila action figures on top of our wedding cake.
Yes.
And, that's just something that was so special to me. And so then getting to this point in MOTU, where we finally get to see some of those things that I love about the series finally realized, we got to see Adam and Tila get together, and it was just such a satisfying, cool moment. So I love Filmation, I love Revelation, and I have very specific reasons for both. And so
I mean, and that's the thing too. It's like I love how it can span generations. Like that's something that's so special too, where it's like I got to go to PowerCon right after the first season, I think, and just getting to see like dads and their daughters, or like the whole family showing up and just being like, we watched the original and now we get to watch this one together. And that to me, like, even though and there were also like 2 animated shows happening at the same time, and ours I think is a little bit more adult, but it's still that thing where it's like you could watch it with your kids and be able to connect on some level that I think it's hard to do in a lot of different properties. And I love that about this, where it was like I do really, as picky as I can be about the projects that I choose to do, I think there's something that I always want it to be a project where it's putting good into the world in some way. And this for me is something where it was like, I obviously grew up loving it, but also it is so stinking cool to get to flesh out a character that is, a woman and a woman of color in this series that we hadn't had a story about before, where it's like, I know how, like I said, how I got into comic books was there weren't tons of characters that looked like me or that I could relate to in such a close way. And so getting to bring this character to life, it's just been absolutely wonderful. I'm like, and then getting to talk about like magic and technology, which like I'm a huge magic fan. Like I play Magic the Gathering, but also like I've taken magic classes at the Magic Castle. So I'm like getting to play with that stuff that happens in the world of MOTU has been really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I one thing when I talk to people who work specifically on Revelation and Revolution, I want to make sure that they know how loved it is by fans, and so I want to express that to you. I know there was noise around the first season that was pretty negative, but I loved it. I adored it. It was exactly what I wanted to see, and it just felt like it felt like it was speaking directly to me in a lot of aspects, and so I just want to make sure that whenever I get the chance to talk to people who were a part of that, that they understand and know you know, that it is appreciated and that we do see it as fans. And so thank you for your part in that, and continuing forward with this new comic. You know, just you're adding to the wealth that this brand has to offer, and I think that's something that's so very special. So
well, thank you so much for saying that. I really, really appreciate it. Like I said before, I feel lucky that I get to be a part of it. And then it's one of those things where it's like, you know in the back of your mind that the thing you're creating is gonna like stick around for a while, but also then you hear it out loud and you're like, oh God, I hope they like it. So but again, I think that I only feel that way because I am so passionate about it. And you know, you want it to add something positive to the world that you love so much. So if I didn't feel nervous about it, I would think that was weird. Like there's just this, I'm learning the more things I try and the more I push myself out of my comfort zone, realizing that like the energy of excitement and fear feel exactly the same. So sometimes it's a crossover of like, okay, am I scared to do this or excited to do this? And if it's a little bit of both, then that's okay. So that was very much a lot of the calls that Tim got from me were the scared, excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So and I think that excitement.
Also, like if you're anxious about it, it's because it's important to you. Like, yes, you want to do a good job at it. You want to give it the due that it needs, you know? And so I think that that's something that helps me when it's like, okay, if I'm not nervous about it at all, how much do I really want to be doing this thing? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's like I go back to, I remember the first day we recorded for Master of the Universe, I left the booth and I got in the car and I called one of my friends and I was like, I'm going to be fired. Like, I don't know how to do this thing. I don't think I'm doing it right. And then I remember Susan Eisenberg, who was our sorceress, so insanely talented. I messaged her. I was like, hey, do you mind just grabbing like lunch with me one day so I can just pick your brain? And she was so supportive and she was like, what are you talking about? Like because she had recorded, we only had one session where we recorded with other voice actors and one of them was with her. And so she was like, I had no idea that you've never done like a full series. I had no clue. It didn't come across at all. So you're just like, it's so interesting when you're on the inside, kind of going back to the friendship of Tila and Andra, where you're like, it takes somebody on the outside to tell you what other people are actually seeing. And so, yeah, it was, I mean, but again, I was so excited about it and I wanted to make sure that I was doing a good job, which is why I was so nervous about it.
Oh, that's incredible. Well, again, you nailed it. And thank you for what you did with it. And I'm happy that you are Andra. And I think that's great.
Thank you.
Now, to kind of pivot away from that, let's talk briefly about the comic itself. I know we can't talk too much about it because we don't want to get to spoilers. Like we said at the top of the interview, you know, this takes place between Revelation and Revolution, and your character, you know, Andra, is now the Man-at-Arms. And it's kind of a Man-at-Arms year one for you. This is kind of your first big adventure, and from the synopsis, you know, it says that there's something going on Orkas Island, and there's a familiar villain who's coming back, you know, Count Marzo. Maybe some other characters that we can't name right now that I hope show up. So I guess I don't really know how to ask this question. But
well, this is what I will tell you. When I started thinking about what I was going to do with this book, it was great. I was on a call with Rob David and, you know, it was during the pandemic, or I can't remember if it was pandemic or strike at this point. And he was like, well, what other stuff do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to do more voiceover. I think I want to write a comic book. And he's like, well, what about an Andra comic book? And I was like, yes. And so then the next step was kind of write up a one page and come up with what story you want to tell. And, what was so cool is that I really had so much freedom in the story I wanted to tell. There weren't a lot of parameters, which when you're working in a property where it's like there's so many other moving pieces going on with the film and, you know, the animated shows and how much people have their backstories, and where it's like, okay, what toys in this world am I allowed to play with? And I remember I sat down with my MOTU character encyclopedia and was like looking through that and be like, who can I bring in? And like I said, that exact one. And I love, like I said, magic and just getting to do stuff within that space. And the cool thing about it is like, no one can tell you what magic can or can't do.
Right.
So you kind of just get to like play around, and how fun it is to create a story around a villain that has a magical amulet that might do some cool stuff. And I think kind of even going back to what you were saying about the Tila and Andra relationship, I think that this story, it really helps Andra to see herself as other people do. And I think that that's something that it's crazy because you hear so many times that writers that will like work through things as they're writing them. And I think that was something for me where it was like, if you are separated from a lot of other things that like you have identified with and created an identity with, what's left and what does that look like? And then getting to dig into her past a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I think that's all I can say. As I'm talking about it more, I'm like, am I giving stuff away that I shouldn't be saying? But I definitely had fun with the character encyclopedia. I definitely also get to bring a vehicle in that I was super pumped about.
Oh, now you're just teasing me. Now you're being mean.
I think that's what's so fun about this is that like sometimes I was like, okay, so I know we're going to this place. What cool toys can I bring in that that we all knew about and had and wanted? And so just literally like getting to play in the sandbox of MOTU was incredible. And more often than not, it was like, oh wait, I shouldn't bring that. If I bring that in, then I have to think about this, this, and this. And so it's like, let me keep it streamlined, because like you said, it does happen between season 1 and season 2 of the show. So I also had, which I think that helps, having those guardrails where you're like, okay, I know where it started and I know where we have to end, and it can't be anything that's like too out of the realm of that world, because we already have the bookends done. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to keep you too long. I know you're busy, so we can kind of wrap things up here. But before you go, I'd like to ask you, aside from Andra, who is your favorite Masters of the Universe character? Because I know Andra's your favorite. She's got to be.
Yeah, I mean, she definitely is. She definitely is. That's hard. I mean, I think it's probably Orko. I mean, I think that there is something so special about that character, and getting to see, again, there is so much of me that likes seeing characters get their due, where it's like in the original cartoon, you know, he's just kind of like a bumbling mess up a lot of times. And so getting to see him get to use his gifts in a really positive, awesome way, and getting him like, just like some of the moments in Revelation, just getting to see Orko bring those to life, and Griffin Newman voiced that character, and he did such an insanely incredible job.
Definitely.
That I think it's Orko. Yeah, I mean, because everybody's gonna say like He-Man or Prince Adam or like Orko.
Yeah. You know, we were talking a little bit earlier about how this is one of those generation spanning franchises that parents are able to connect with their kids on. With Revelation specifically, I watched it with my sons. They're teenagers now, but my youngest son, when we watched it, you know, he was kind of going through a phase in his life. He was in middle school. He didn't have a lot of confidence and stuff, you know, some pretty typical kid things.
Yeah.
And then he saw Orko, and he saw what Orko's story was about and what he was dealing with, and finally seeing Orko kind of become who he was meant to be, and he really identified with that character and kind of fell in love with Orko.
Yeah.
And now he has Orko t-shirts that he wears, and you know, I had the opportunity to interview Griffin a while back, and he's such a sweetheart. He took the time off air to talk with my son, just briefly about Orko, you know, and so my son got to meet the voice actor of the character that he connected with, and it was just so special as a dad, you know, just
to even talk him up even more, because he wanted to make sure that it was his voice and that there was no like tech that was overlaid over his voice to get that Orko voice, because he wanted to be able to do the voice at conventions for people. Like, and awesome. It's so like, it's just so incredible when you kind of realize that about him as a person, you know, where it's like, that's just, it could have been super easy to be like, he can do the voice and then we're just going to like tweak it a little bit. But he was like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make the voice happen just from me. And so that doesn't surprise me at all that he was like, I will sit and chat with him about the character.
Yeah.
It's so Orko.
very, very Orko. And just, he was perfect for the role. And so, well, Tiffany, thank you so much for chatting with me today. This has been such a pleasure for me, and really great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, and thanks for having me. I'm like, literally one of the best things about the world of MOTU is all the fans. Everybody's so kind and wonderful, and I've had such a good experience with everyone. So it's really fun for me to get to sit and chat with everybody, because so much of the time that the show came out was, you know, everyone was so separated, and so now getting to start talking to people more about the comic, I'm just really excited because I get to meet more of you guys.
Awesome. Well, hopefully in the future we can do this again. I think that would be really fun if you're up to it, and we'll see what the future brings.
Yeah. So. Once I can actually talk more about the comic book, which also, if you haven't yet, everyone call your comic shop and pre-order it. It comes out on the 25th of July, but we're going to get the pre-orders in June. But I can't wait. I can't wait for me to have one in my hands and for all of you guys to have it in your hands too. So
yeah, definitely. And we will all include all that information in the show notes and
awesome.
And stuff like that. So before we leave, what is there anything that you would like to plug? Where can people find you on social media?
Yeah. So everybody can find me on social media. I'm Tiffany_Smith. Just announced that I'm headed to London at the end of or mid-May for a play. So if anyone's in London, come see our show. It's called Water Party. And then obviously the comic book's coming out. And if you guys have or haven't been following me, I'm in the midst of producing and starring in a feature called Deepest Darkest. And we just finished filming with Rosario Dawson and Ernie Hudson. We've still got a little ways to go, but if you follow me on social, you get updates on all that kind of stuff there too.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you so much. And we will call that good for today. So everybody, thank you for joining us for this episode, and make sure when those pre-orders are available to order the new Andra one-shot comic. It's going to be awesome. So thanks everybody. We'll see ya.
Bye.